Captain Vexthul stood on the bridge of his massive warship, looking out at the stars he had conquered. For over 200 years, he had led the Korthak Empire's most deadly hunting fleet across the galaxy. Every species they encountered either bowed down in fear or became food for his warriors. The Korthak were perfect killing machines. Evolution and science had made them into something nightmarish. Their claws were sharper than any blade humans had ever made. When they got angry, acid flowed through their veins instead of regular blood. If someone tried to cage them, they could literally melt their way out. Their eyes could see in complete darkness, and they could hear a heartbeat from across a room. But what made them truly terrifying was their speed. A Korthak warrior could move faster than most creatures could even think. They had reflexes that let them catch bullets in midair. In battle, they were like deadly shadows that struck before their enemies even knew death was coming. Vexthul had personally led the conquest of 47 different worlds. Some planets tried to fight back with their armies and weapons. Others tried to hide or run away. A few even tried to negotiate or offer tribute. None of it ever worked. The Korthak took what they wanted and left nothing but empty worlds behind. Them. His ship was filled with trophies from 1,000 different battles, skulls from brave warriors who had tried to stop him, weapons that had failed to pierce Korthak armor, crown jewels from kings who thought their wealth could buy mercy. Each item told the story of another species that had learned too late what it meant to face the galaxy's apex predators. The other Korthak on his ship looked up to him like a god of war. Young warriors would gather around him in the mess halls, listening to his stories of conquest. He would tell them how he had single-handedly destroyed entire armies, how he had hunted down fleeing survivors through asteroid fields, how he had made proud civilizations beg for quick deaths. Then the sensors detected something interesting. Deep in an unexplored part of the galaxy, there was a small solar system with 9 planets orbiting a yellow star. The third planet from the Sun was giving off energy readings that suggested intelligent life. It was covered mostly in water, with green and brown landmasses scattered across its surface. To Vexthul, it looked like every other easy target they had found before. The planet seemed quiet and peaceful. There were no massive defense stations floating in space around it. No powerful energy shields protecting it from invasion. No fleets of warships patrolling its borders. He smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth that had torn through the throats of countless enemies. This would be a simple harvest mission. His warriors were getting restless anyway, and they needed some practice hunting fresh prey. The creatures on this blue world would learn what every other species in the galaxy had learned. The Korthak were the ultimate predators, and nothing in the universe could change that fact. As the Korthak fleet moved closer to the blue planet, their communication systems started picking up strange signals. At first, the technicians thought it was just random noise from space. But when they cleaned up the transmissions, they discovered something that made their blood run cold. The signals were coming from the planet itself. The creatures down there were broadcasting moving pictures and sounds across their entire world. Commander Thexnel, Vexthul's most trusted officer, was the first to realize what they were seeing. These weren't just random transmissions. The inhabitants, who called themselves humans, were showing each other images of the most terrifying creatures Thexnel had ever seen. There were massive fish with rows of razor-sharp teeth that could bite a Korthak warrior in half. The humans called them sharks, and instead of running away from them, they were swimming right next to them. One transmission showed a human actually grabbing onto the fin of one of these killing machines and riding it through the water like it was some kind of pet. The shark was longer than most Korthak shuttlecraft, with teeth that could crush steel, and this human was treating it like a friend. But the sharks were just the beginning. There were striped predators that moved through tall grass without making a single sound. The humans called them tigers, and they hunted with a patience and skill that impressed even veteran Korthak warriors. These creatures could leap incredible distances and had claws that could tear through armor. Then there were the giant serpents. Some were as thick as tree trunks and long enough to wrap around a small building. The humans showed footage of these. Snakes swallowing entire animals whole, crushing their prey to death before eating them. What shocked the Korthak most was that some humans actually kept these deadly creatures in their homes. Thexnel spent days studying the transmissions, trying to understand what he was seeing. The humans had entire television programs dedicated to these predators. They made documentaries about them, studied their hunting patterns, and even had special weeks where they celebrated their favorite killers. One transmission showed thousands of humans gathering to watch these deadly creatures up close. They called it Shark Week, and instead of being terrified, the humans seemed excited and happy. Children were laughing as they watched footage of sharks tearing apart their prey. But what really disturbed Thexnol were the humans who actually hunted these monsters for fun. There were shows where humans would track down massive crocodiles with nothing but ropes and their bare hands. These crocodiles had jaws powerful enough to snap a Korthak in two, and humans were wrestling with them, like it was a game. When Thexnal reported his findings to Captain Vexthal, his voice was shaking. "Sir, these humans don't just live alongside apex predators, they celebrate them. They make entertainment out of them. Some humans even keep them as pets or hunt them for sport." Vexthal tried to dismiss it as primitive behavior, but deep down, doubt was starting to grow in his mind. What kind of species treated the galaxy's most dangerous predators like entertainment? Scout leader Kexmar felt completely confident as his shuttle touched down in the thick green forest. He had led scouting missions on dozens of worlds, and this one looked no different from any other primitive planet. The trees were tall and dense, filled with the sounds of small creatures chirping and calling to each other. It seemed peaceful, almost boring. His team of 5 elite Korthak warriors stepped out of the shuttle, their enhanced senses immediately scanning the area for threats. Their night vision could see clearly in the dim light filtering through the forest canopy. Their hearing could pick up the heartbeat of a small animal from 50 meters away. They were the perfect hunters, evolved over millions of years to be unstoppable killing machines. Kexmar activated his recording device to document their easy conquest of this backward world. "Landing successful," he reported back to the ship. "No immediate threats detected." Beginning reconnaissance of primitive forest environment, the team spread out in standard formation, moving silently through the undergrowth. They had done this same routine hundreds of times before. Scout the area, identify any dangerous local wildlife, locate the dominant species, and report back, with invasion recommendations. It should have taken a few hours at most. 20 minutes into their mission, Kexmar realized something was wrong. His motion sensors were picking up movement everywhere around them, but his eyes couldn't see anything threatening. The forest seemed alive in ways that made his combat instincts scream warnings. Then warrior Zektal simply vanished. One moment he was there, moving through a patch of thick vines, and the next moment there was only silence. No cry for help, no sound of struggle, nothing. Kexmar rushed to the spot where his warrior had been, but found only disturbed leaves and a few drops of dark liquid on the ground. "Zektal, report your position," he whispered into his communicator. Only static answered him back. The team regrouped, weapons drawn, scanning every shadow and branch above them. That's when they saw it. Coiled around a thick branch 20 meters above their heads was the largest serpent any of them had ever encountered. It was easily 15 meters long and thick enough that Kexmar couldn't have wrapped his arms around it. But what terrified him most was that the snake wasn't even looking at them. It was slowly digesting something large in its belly, completely unconcerned by the presence of 5 armed alien warriors. This creature had just eaten a Korthak scout like it was nothing more than a regular meal. Before they could react, warrior, Nixthor disappeared next. This time Kexmar caught a glimpse of what took him. Golden fur covered in black spots, muscles that moved like liquid steel, and eyes that reflected light like mirrors in the darkness. The creature moved so silently that even Korthak hearing couldn't detect its approach. The jaguar dragged Nixthor up into the trees faster than the eye could follow. By the time Kexmar aimed his weapon, both predator and prey had vanished into the green canopy above. Now only 3 Korthak remained, huddled together in terror. These were warriors who had conquered star systems, who had never known fear in their entire lives. But here they were, being hunted by creatures that treated them like any other prey animal. The worst part came when Kexmar activated his emergency beacon to call for extraction. The response from the ship made his blood freeze in his veins. "Confirmed, Scout Leader. Those creatures you describe are common wildlife on this planet. They are not the dominant species. Repeat, those are just animals. The actual rulers of this world are still unknown. Intelligence Officer Nexthor had been studying alien species for over a century, but nothing had prepared him for what he was seeing on the screens in front of him. The Korthak fleet's most advanced surveillance equipment was focused on the blue planet below, recording everything the humans did in their daily lives. What he discovered made no sense according to everything the Korthak knew about survival and evolution. The first footage that caught his attention showed a human beach where hundreds of these strange creatures were playing in the water, but they weren't alone. Swimming right next to them were the same massive sharks that had killed and eaten sea creatures in the broadcasts they had intercepted earlier. Nexthor watched in disbelief as human children, barely large enough to be considered hatchlings, splashed and laughed while deadly predators circled around them. The sharks were close enough to bite these small humans in half with a single snap of their jaws. Instead, they seemed to be swimming alongside them peacefully. One piece of footage showed an adult human actually reaching out and touching a shark's fin as it glided past. The shark, which was easily 3 times the length of the human, didn't attack. It just continued swimming like nothing had happened, but the beaches were just the beginning of what Nexthor discovered. Deep in the planet's forests, his cameras captured humans doing things that defied all logic. There was footage of a human walking calmly through tall grass, knowing that somewhere nearby was one of those striped killing machines they called tigers. The human wasn't running or hiding. He was actually tracking the predator, following its footprints like he was hunting it. Even more shocking were the humans who worked with serpents. Nexthor found recordings of humans reaching into dark holes and pulling out snakes that could kill with a single bite. These weren't small, harmless creatures. These were venomous serpents whose poison could drop a full-grown Korthak warrior. In seconds, the humans would grab these deadly snakes right behind their heads, holding them up to examine them, completely calm and relaxed. Some humans even smiled while they did this, like they were handling harmless pets. But what really shattered Nexthor's understanding of the universe was what humans did for entertainment. He found footage of humans building special pools in there, homes where they kept sharks as decorative animals. These weren't small fish. These were real predators, swimming in circles while human families sat nearby, eating their meals and watching them like living art. There were humans who raised wolves, from babies, turning apex predators into loyal companions that followed them around like devoted servants. Creatures that should have been ripping these humans apart were instead playing with human children and sleeping in their homes. The most disturbing footage showed humans in large arenas, wrestling with creatures that the Korthak considered extremely dangerous. Giant reptiles with jaws powerful enough to crush steel were being grabbed and pinned down by humans using nothing but their bare hands and some rope. The crowd of watching humans wasn't screaming in terror. They were cheering and applauding like this was the most entertaining thing they had ever seen. When Nexthor compiled his final report, his hands were trembling as he typed. "Captain Vex Thul," he began, "these humans have done something that should be impossible. They have taken the apex predators of their world and turned them into entertainment, companions, and decorations. They don't fear these creatures, they control them." Assault Commander Grixnal led 20 of the Korthak, Empire's most elite warriors, toward what their sensors had identified as a human military installation. The massive concrete structure sat on an island surrounded by dark water, with high walls and watchtowers that suggested it was some kind of fortress or command center. The assault team had prepared for the usual pattern they had seen on hundreds of worlds. The defending species would panic when they saw Korthak warriors. They would fire primitive weapons that couldn't pierce Korthak armor. Then they would either surrender or run away screaming while the Korthak took control of their most important facilities. Grixnal's warriors moved through the shadows, their enhanced vision easily penetrating the darkness around the human structure. Their stealth technology made them nearly invisible as they approached the outer walls. Everything was going according to their standard invasion protocol. The first sign that something was different came when they breached the perimeter. Instead of military equipment or weapon storage areas, they found themselves in long corridors lined with small rooms. Each room had thick metal doors with tiny windows and heavy locks that looked designed to keep something inside rather than keep intruders out. Through the windows, Grixnell could see humans inside these small rooms, but these weren't the frightened civilians or panicked soldiers he expected to find. These humans looked different. Their eyes had a coldness that reminded him of the most dangerous predators he had encountered across the galaxy. One human noticed the Korthak warriors moving past his cell window. Instead of screaming or showing fear, he just smiled. It was the kind of smile Grixnell had seen on the faces of serial killers and war criminals from a dozen different species. A smile that suggested this human was thinking about all the terrible things he wanted to do to the aliens walking past his cage. As the assault team moved deeper into the facility, they began to understand what they had stumbled into. This wasn't a military base at all. It was a prison, and the most dangerous members of human society were locked inside these rooms. The humans in these cells had been deemed too dangerous to live among their own kind. Their own species had decided that these particular humans were such threats that they needed to be caged away from everyone else. Some had killed other humans, some had hurt children, others had committed crimes so terrible that their fellow humans had locked them away forever. What terrified Grixnell most was how the human guards reacted to the alien intrusion. When the Korthak warriors were finally detected by the facility's security systems, the human guards didn't panic or call for military backup. They just sighed and reached for their communication devices like this was something that happened every Tuesday. One guard actually seemed annoyed rather than afraid. "Great, more weirdos trying to break into the prison," he muttered as he activated the alarm systems. "Why do the crazy ones always want to get inside instead of trying to break?" "Hout!" The guard treated a squad of galactic apex predators like they were just another minor inconvenience in his daily routine. He had spent so much time around humans who were genuinely dangerous that alien monsters didn't even register as a serious threat. As the assault team retreated in confusion and terror, Grixnell realized the horrible truth. If humans locked away their own kind for being too dangerous, what did that say about the humans who were allowed to walk free in their society? For 3 days, Captain Vexthul waited for the humans to respond to their presence with the usual pattern of fear and surrender. Instead, something started happening that had never occurred in 2 centuries of Korthak conquests. The hunters were becoming the hunted. Lieutenant Daeho Kim had been tracking alien movements for 72 hours straight without sleep. His Special Forces team had been deployed the moment satellites detected the unauthorized landings, and they had been studying Korthak behavior patterns ever since. What they found was almost disappointing. "They move like amateurs," Kim reported to his command. "Their stealth technology is impressive, but they have no idea how to use terrain to their advantage. They're used to intimidating their enemies, not actually hunting them." Kim's team consisted of 12 human soldiers who had been selected for their ability to operate in impossible conditions. They had trained in Arctic wastelands where the cold could kill in minutes. They had survived in deserts where water was more precious than gold. They had learned to fight in jungles where every plant and animal was trying to kill them. The Korthak had evolved to be perfect predators, but they had never learned to be prey. Humans had spent their entire evolutionary history being hunted by creatures faster, stronger, and more dangerous than themselves. They had survived by becoming smarter, more adaptable, and more ruthless than anything that wanted to eat them. When the Korthak scout teams tried to move through Earth's forests, they found themselves being tracked by enemies they couldn't see or hear. Kim's soldiers moved through swampland that should have been impossible for any creature to navigate. They emerged from muddy water without making a single splash, covered in camouflage that made them invisible even to Korthak-enhanced vision. The aliens had technology that could bend light around their bodies, making them nearly transparent. But Kim's team had thermal imaging that could track body heat, motion sensors that detected the slightest movement, and decades of experience hunting enemies who didn't want to be found. One Korthak patrol found themselves surrounded in a clearing where they had stopped to rest. They never saw the humans approaching. Kim's soldiers had crawled through thick underbrush for 2 hours, moving so slowly and carefully that even enhanced alien senses couldn't detect them. When the humans finally revealed themselves, they didn't attack immediately. Instead, they simply watched from the shadows, letting the Korthak know they were being observed. The psychological effect was devastating. These were warriors who had conquered star systems, and now they were jumping at every shadow and sound. The worst part for the Korthak was realizing that the humans were playing with them. Kim's team could have eliminated the alien scouts at any time, but they chose not to. They wanted the survivors to return to their ship and report what they had experienced. Back on the Korthak flagship, Vexthul listened to increasingly panicked reports from his ground teams. Warriors who had never shown fear in their lives were requesting immediate extraction. Scout leaders, who had tracked prey across entire continents, were losing their nerve after just a few hours on Earth's surface. "Sir," one terrified scout reported, "they know where we are before we even decide where we're going. They're in the trees, in the water, underground. They're everywhere and nowhere at the same time." Vexthul felt something he had never experienced in his entire life. The cold fear of being hunted by something more dangerous than himself. Sergeant Min-Soo Park crouched in the thick Korean forest, watching a group of 6 Korthak warriors stumble through the underbrush like tourists on their first camping trip. These aliens had conquered dozens of worlds, but they moved through Earth's wilderness like they had never seen a real forest before. Park had grown up in these mountains. As a child, he had learned to identify the sounds of wild boars crashing through the trees, the warning calls of birds when tigers were nearby, and the subtle changes in insect noise that meant a venomous snake was hunting. The forest wasn't just his battlefield, it was his home. His team of 8 soldiers had been tracking the Korthak hunting party for 6 hours. The aliens thought they were being stealthy, but they left a trail that any human child could follow. Broken branches, disturbed leaves, footprints in soft earth, and the lingering scent of alien technology that didn't belong in the natural environment. What amazed Park most was how unprepared the Korthak were for Earth's wildlife. These creatures had apparently never encountered an environment where the plants and animals were actively trying to kill them. They jumped at every sound, spun around at every movement in the bushes, and seemed genuinely surprised when they stepped on thorns or walked into spider webs. Park's team moved through the same terrain like ghosts. They knew which branches would support their weight and which ones would snap. They could identify safe paths through patches of stinging nettles and avoid the areas where wild boars liked to sleep. Most importantly, they understood that everything in Earth's wilderness was either trying to eat them, poison them, or make them into a home for its babies. The Korthak had stopped in a small clearing to rest, clearly exhausted from their clumsy march through the forest. They had their weapons out and were scanning the area with their enhanced senses, but they were looking for obvious threats. They expected enemies to charge at them with loud battle cries, just like the primitive species they had conquered before. That's when Park decided to demonstrate why humans had become the dominant species on their planet. He signaled to his team using hand gestures that were completely silent. 2 soldiers moved to positions on the far side of the clearing. 2 others climbed into trees where they could provide covering fire. The remaining 4 spread out to create a perfect circle around the alien warriors. The Korthak never saw them coming. One moment they were alone in the clearing, and the next moment they found themselves surrounded by 8 human soldiers who had appeared from nowhere like deadly spirits. But Park didn't order his team to fire immediately. Instead, he wanted the aliens to understand something important about human military thinking. "You move like you've never been hunted before," Park called out to the Korthak in their own language, which human intelligence had already decoded. "On our world, everything is trying to kill everything else. We learn to fight by assuming that every enemy is smarter, faster, and more dangerous than we are." The lead Korthak warrior raised his weapon, but Park's team had already calculated his movement patterns. 3 laser dots appeared on the alien's chest before he could even aim. "We don't just prepare for the enemies we can see," Park continued, his voice calm and educational. "We prepare for the ones hiding in the shadows, the ones setting traps, and the ones smart enough to make us think we're winning right up until the moment they kill us." The Korthak realized they weren't just outmatched. They were facing a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of warfare against opponents that wanted to eat them alive. Captain Vexthul had made the decision to face the humans directly. After weeks of watching his warriors being systematically hunted and defeated, he needed to prove that the Korthak were still the galaxy's apex predators. He chose the mountains near Seoul for their final confrontation, thinking the rocky terrain would give his remaining forces an advantage. He brought his best warriors, the ones who had survived the longest in Earth's hostile environment. 20 elite Korthak soldiers, each one a veteran of dozens of planetary conquests. They positioned themselves on high ground, using their advanced weapons and enhanced senses to create what should have been an impregnable defensive position. Colonel Jamin Lee studied the alien positions through his binoculars, noting how the Korthak had arranged themselves like they were fighting a conventional battle from 1,000 years ago. They had good sightlines and superior firepower, but they were thinking like predators who had always been at the top of the food chain. "They still don't understand," Lee muttered to his second-in-command. "They think this is about being bigger, faster, and stronger. They have no idea what they're really up against." Lee's special operations team consisted of 30 soldiers who had trained for scenarios exactly like this. They had studied every form of warfare that humans had ever developed, from ancient tribal raids to modern urban combat. More importantly, they understood something the Korthak didn't. Humans had spent their entire history fighting enemies who were supposedly superior to them. The battle began when the Korthak opened fire with energy weapons that could melt through steel. Their shots lit up the mountainside like a deadly light show, but they were firing at shadows and empty positions. Lee's team had already moved from their initial locations using techniques borrowed from mountain warfare tactics that were centuries old. What followed wasn't really a battle in the way the Korthak understood fighting. It was a systematic demonstration of how humans had learned to defeat enemies who should have been able to kill them easily. Lee's soldiers used the terrain like it was a weapon. They appeared from behind rocks the Korthak thought were too small to hide anyone. They emerged from crevices that seemed too narrow for human bodies. They fired from positions that should have been impossible to reach, then vanished before return fire could find them. The Korthak had superior technology, but the humans had superior tactics. Every time the aliens tried to advance, they found themselves walking into carefully prepared traps. Every time they tried to retreat, they discovered that their escape routes had been cut off hours earlier. One by one, Vexthul watched his warriors fall to an enemy that refused to fight fair. The humans used deception, misdirection, and coordination that had been perfected through thousands of years of warfare against opponents who were bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than individual human soldiers. When the battle was over, Vexthul found himself wounded and surrounded, his weapon destroyed and his remaining warriors either dead or captured. Colonel Lee approached him without fear, removing his helmet to show a face that was completely calm and professional. "Your tactics are impressive for a species that's always been the biggest predator around," Lee said, his voice respectful but firm. "But you hunt like humans did 10,000 years ago, when we thought being the strongest was enough to win." "Dota." Lee gestured toward the mountains around them, where evidence of the battle was already being cleaned up by his efficient soldiers. "We learned to hunt everything on our world, including each other. We faced creatures with bigger teeth, stronger claws, and better senses than us. So we got smarter. We learned to work together, to use tools, to turn our environment into a weapon." The colonel looked down at the defeated Korthak captain with something that might have been pity. "You're just another predator to us. An interesting challenge, but nothing we haven't handled before." The few surviving Korthak ships limped away from Earth's solar system, their hulls scarred, and their crews traumatized by what they had experienced. Captain Vexthul, now missing an arm and bearing scars that would never fully heal, sat in his command chair and tried to process what had happened to his once mighty empire. His fleet had been reduced from hundreds of ships to less than 20. Most of his warriors were dead, captured, or had simply disappeared in Earth's hostile wilderness. The survivors who made it back to the ships were broken, jumping at shadows, and refusing to talk about what they had seen on the planet's surface. But Vexthul knew he had a responsibility to warn the rest of the galaxy about what they had discovered. As his damaged fleet moved toward the nearest Korthak outpost, he began composing the most important message he would ever send. The warning spread through galactic communication networks faster than any military conquest had ever traveled. Every spacefaring civilization received the same chilling report. The Korthak Empire, conquerors of hundreds of worlds, had been utterly defeated by a single planet of creatures called humans. But the most terrifying part of the message wasn't about human military superiority. It was about what the humans had done to their own world before they ever reached for the stars. Earth's oceans contained predators with jaws powerful enough to bite starships in half, but humans swam with them for fun. The planet's forests were filled with creatures that could hunt Korthak warriors, but humans had turned them into pets and entertainment. The very air and water of Earth contained microscopic killers that could destroy entire ecosystems, but humans had learned to control and weaponize them. The humans hadn't just survived on a world that was actively trying to kill them. They had conquered it so completely that the most dangerous predators on the planet served them, feared them, or existed only because humans allowed them to continue living. Other galactic civilizations read these reports with growing horror. If the Korthak, who had been the undisputed apex predators of known space for centuries, could be defeated so easily, what chance did anyone else have against these humans? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. 3 months after the Korthak defeat, long-range sensors across the galaxy began detecting new energy signatures moving through space. Human exploration fleets were leaving their solar system, spreading out in all directions with technology that was primitive by galactic standards, but tactics that were devastatingly effective. Captain So Young Han commanded the lead exploration vessel as it approached the first former Korthak colony. Her ship was smaller and less advanced than most galactic military vessels, but her crew had something that no other species possessed. They came from a world where everything had tried to kill them, and they had not only survived but thrived. When her ship entered orbit around the abandoned Korthak world, Han opened communication channels to broadcast humanity's first official message to the galactic community. Her voice was calm and professional, but underneath the diplomatic language was something that made every listener's blood run cold. "Greetings to all intelligent species," she began. "We are humans from the planet Earth. We come seeking knowledge, friendship, and peaceful cooperation with all forms of life we encounter in our exploration of the galaxy." There was a pause, and when she continued, her tone remained pleasant but carried an undertone that every predator species in the galaxy recognized immediately. "We hope to learn from your civilizations and share our own discoveries and experiences. We believe that cooperation and mutual respect are the foundations of a successful galactic community." Another pause, longer this time. "However, we want to make one thing perfectly clear to everyone listening to this message. We come in peace, but we are prepared for anything. Our planet taught us that the universe is not a safe place, and we have learned to adapt to whatever challenges we face." The transmission ended, but its impact rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. Every species that received it understood the real message hidden beneath the diplomatic words. The humans were offering friendship, but they were also making it clear that they were ready for war. The age of human expansion had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again.